Well, hey folks, my name is Joshua and I'm the community pastor here and really excited to be with you guys today, be able to share. Before we get started, let me pray real quick. Hey God, thank you for this opportunity to share. Thank you for what you've done in my life, the story that you've written in my life, and the opportunity to share that. God, I pray that something connects with folks in the room today and they see you more clearly and they see a better way and a new way to follow you. Just in Jesus' name we pray, amen. So that song the band just played at the very beginning of it, that song, This Little Light of Mine, I heard that song and probably sang that song 1,000,001 times as a kid. I grew up in church, and if you grow up in church and your father's in ministry, which my father was, you happen to usually be a part of this thing called the children's choir if you grew up in a smaller church. I was one of those kids, and you're not part of the children's choir because you want to, you're part of it because you are a kid and you go to that church. So you're just in it. There's no question, you're just gonna be in it. And one of the songs that you're probably gonna sing is This Little Light of Mine. And that's one that I sang over and over and over again. Maybe you've never heard that before, you didn't hear it in church, you didn't grow up in church, maybe you heard it different places. That song was one of the anthems of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. That song is in pop culture all over the place. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And usually it's a little kid singing it, and it seems really sweet and really innocent. But as I grew up and I got older, I realized that statement, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, that's actually a really bold and aggressive statement. And as I grew up, the way that I saw that played out was not something that I wanted, because that bold and aggressive statement looked like always wearing Christian t-shirts everywhere you went. Or if you're a kid of the 90s like I was, it was rocking a WWJD bracelet, nonstop. Probably had one in each and every single color. It was listening to Christian music and K-Love and shouting the Bible everywhere you went. And that did not look like something I wanted to do as a kid. It's not something I want to do as a teenager. But as I've gotten a little bit older, as I've grown, I've learned what it really means and how you do that in a bold and aggressive way. Looks like sharing your story. That's not something I've always known. I came to Crossroads in college a few times, really got engaged around here after I graduated. And over time, as I got involved in groups, as I got in the community, as I volunteered around here, as I joined staff, this same question kept coming up over and over and over again. And it always seemed like a weird question to me. People would just walk up to you and say, so what's your story? Like, what? What's my story? That's kind of a weird way of asking that question, like asking about me. And originally, I just did, basic stats. This is where I'm from, this is how I grew up, my parents do this, I have older siblings, I went to UC, yada, 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 just the basic stats. But that question just kept coming up. And finally, I learned why. It's because story is ingrained in all of us. We all have a story, we all understand stories, and it's the best way we connect to other people. Think about the movies and the TV and even the music that you listen to and that you watch, that you consume. What you're connected to most is the one that has a story that speaks to you. We all love stories. So I've gotten used to sharing my story. At first, it was just in small bits and pieces. And then over time, it grew into larger things. So 2 years ago exactly, during this very series, during the Spark series, I was asked to share my story about how I actually learned to start following Jesus after I graduated from college. I grew up in church, but it really wasn't evident in my life until I graduated and learned what it really meant to follow God. And I prepared for it, I was ready for it. I was like, yeah, I can do this. So I wrote it all out, prepared. I rehearsed it a couple times at home. We do this thing every single week before service, we do run-throughs. So everything that happens in service every single week, our team runs through before this very service. I did it there and it was all good. And then I got on stage during the first service and I started to talk. And about 2/3 of the way through, something happened. All of a sudden, it was as if someone was cutting 100 onions an inch from my face and tears started flowing. And I couldn't do anything to stop myself. I tried to slow down, pace myself, whatever I did, nothing worked, the tears just kept coming. I didn't think much of it. It kind of bothered me in the moment, but I can move past it really fast. Then last year, get a chance to share my story again and spark again, and this time it's a bigger piece of my story. It's a deeper part of my story, about how I overcame an addiction to pornography and the fear I had about sharing and talking about that publicly. And again, in that message, the tears started flowing. And in that space and over the last year, it's been a thing that I've wrestled with because society tells us that men don't cry. Grown men should not cry. But yet society sets boys up to not be able to process their emotions at all. And now at this point in time in my life, crying is just a normal thing. It's like a running joke with people around me because they know if I get up and I'm gonna speak in front of people or I'm gonna share any bit of my story, I'm gonna cry. There is a roll of photos of me crying. And someone's gotta get the tissues ready because it's gonna happen at some point in time or another. I'm gonna cry, I just can't help it. It just happens. Yeah, they just keep coming. Yup. This has been something that's been going on most of my life. Started when I was a little kid. And it didn't start in such a great place. It started because I was picked on a lot, whether it be at school or in my neighborhood, and I'd come home all the time crying. And my mom and dad were never ones to say, man up, or boys don't cry, but those messages were out there and they got into my head. So probably very early on, first, second grade, I don't even remember, I learned to start shoving my emotions down. Because if I didn't feel all those things, I wouldn't cry. And it kind of worked, but not really. Because every single year, at some point in time, I would have a major emotional outburst. Someone in my neighborhood or at school on a sports team would do something to me, and that person would be the one who would get all of the emotion that I had felt in the last year. And it usually ended in a fight because the world told me it was okay for me to get in a fight with someone, but it wasn't okay for me to cry. So I get into a fight with someone, and honestly, I didn't lose too many fights growing up. I've lost a few, but I didn't lose too many. I get into the fight, then I'd go home, and somewhere by myself, I'd be in a puddle of my tears, barely able to breathe because I was crying so much. And this trend of emotional outburst after emotional outburst, like one a year, continued all the way through elementary school, middle school, junior high, into high school. And then my sophomore year, I ran up against this kid who I had been running into and getting into scrapes with probably since the sixth grade. His name was Jarrell. And you know those people in your life when you were a kid who just knew how to push your buttons? Jarrell was that kid for me. He just knew how to push my buttons every time. One day, we're in the cafeteria, we called it the commons area, and Jarrell and I got into it, started yelling at each other. And it kind of got simmered down, I don't even know how, but it ended, and I walked down the hallway. Bell rang, went to my next class. I thought it was all done. But then, as what happens in high school, there's those instigators. And they found me, and they found Jarrell, and they got in both of our ears. Oh, Josh said he gonna do this. No, he didn't. But then they came to me, Jarrell said this. Jarrell said this about your mom. Oh, bet? All right, let's go. Let's go. Don't talk about moms. Let's go. That day we had a pep rally at the end of the day. It was fall. We were in the fall sports season going into winter. Pep rally for all the sports teams. Went to a pretty big high school, about 1,600 kids. I remember being at pep rally the whole entire time. So, I just can't wait till we get out this thing. I just can't wait. I see red already. We get out the pep rally and I walk out the gym and I'm back in that commons area and I'm searching high and low for Jarrell. And I find him. And he's over by the edge of the cafeteria towards the exit. And I make a beeline to him. And a bunch of people knew what was about to happen. Jarrell and I are face to face, and I'm ready to rip this kid limb from limb. But I had my wits about me because my mom always said something. She said, Joshua, and she's the only person who calls me Joshua. You don't start fights, but you finish them. That was my mom for you. So I was waiting for this kid to swing. Swing, push me, do something, touch me, because if you touch me, it's over for you. And in that moment, all of a sudden, there was this small hand right in the middle of my chest. And someone just kept saying my name over and over again. Josh, Josh, Josh. Someone was trying to calm me down. And I didn't even know who it was in the moment, but I knew it was done. A bunch of teachers were around at that point in time, and I just pushed the hand off of me and I walked down the hallway. The next morning at school, I get called down to the office, which wasn't weird because I was a duty aide in the office, so I got called out of class to help with stuff sometimes. I knew the administration pretty well. I'd been in some leadership programs. As a freshman, got to know them. I get called down to the office, and I walk in, and they say, go to Miss Miller's office. She was our assistant principal. And as soon as I walk in the door of Miss Miller's office, it hit me. Ooh, it was her hand on my chest. Miss Miller is like 5'5", 130 pounds soaking wet. But I loved her. She was one of my favorites. And she knew me really, really well. And she sat me down in her office and proceeded to give me the worst tongue lashing of my life. I mean, she ripped me a new one. It was so bad. It was probably a good 15 minutes of her just yelling at me. And finally, when she calmed down, she sat down in front of me, across from me, and she said, what the heck was that yesterday? Who was that kid in the cafeteria? Because that's not the Josh I know. Where the heck did all that anger come from? You've got to learn to deal with this because that is not who you are, and you can't do that. That can't be who you become. You can't let your anger get the best of you like that. You've got to learn to deal with whatever it is that's going on. And she got through to me in that moment. So I started to learn how to deal with my anger a little bit. But as a 16, 17-year-old kid, I still didn't know how to process my emotions. I went to college and I wasn't having major emotional outbursts. I wasn't breaking down crying. I wasn't getting into fights anymore. I kind of learned how to figure out my way through it, but never really learned how to process my emotions. It's only been the last couple years that that's become a thing for me. And I know that's true for most guys. We're never taught how to process our emotions. We're never told that it is okay for you to cry. It's okay for you to feel. So I never realized that. I never learned how to do that. And even though I started to learn how to process my emotions over the last couple years, as I've shared my story more, the same thing keeps happening. I keep crying. And it's not by myself like it was before in my bedroom where I'm crying by myself and no one's around. It's in front of people. And everything tells me, even though I know no one's actually saying it to my face, everything else, every lie that I've heard from society tells me that it's not okay for me to cry. So over the last year or so, really last 6 months, this question just keeps coming up in the back of my head. Why do I keep crying? Why do I keep crying? Why can't I stop myself? Why can't I hold my emotions in check? What the heck is going on with me? And I can be hard-headed. So in those moments, I do everything I possibly can to try and figure it out on my own. Maybe if I practice more, maybe if I write my talk out a couple different ways, a couple different times, and then I go home and I practice it, and then I practice some more, and I ask some other people to give me feedback on it, and I practice it 4 or 5 times. Maybe I'll talk through it enough times that the emotions will come out then. I'll get it all out, and then when I get in front of people and I actually give my talk, I won't cry. I tried that a few times. That didn't work. It's starting to drive me crazy. Like, what is it? Because something tells me that it's not okay. No one says that it's wrong, but something tells me it's not okay. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. So finally, after a couple of failed attempts at trying to figure it out on my own, I finally do what I should have done in the first place, and I go to God with it. I ask God, what is going on with me? What is wrong with me? Why do I keep crying? Why can't I stop? I journaled about it, and I didn't get an immediate answer, but I did get one eventually. And I feel like I hear from God in a couple different ways, and one of them is through music. About a month and a half ago or so, we were actually preparing for this very series. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do for this weekend. This is a weekend where all of our communities, all of our sites have the opportunity to do things creatively, differently. We don't have a national plan that we're executing, we're doing things all local. So we're trying to figure out what are we gonna do differently at Crossroads Uptown this time. And the team's working hard on it. And there were some ideas thrown out there, and I wasn't able to be at the meeting, but there was a slideshow that was sent to me of the ideas that were thrown out. And one they kind of landed on was a photo of a sparkler. Black screen and sparkler just in the middle of it. The idea was that would be some type of song support, something on screen. It's what you saw earlier. And there'd be a song that played underneath that. They didn't know what the song was. So I'm like, great, these are moments where I love being creative, I love music. Let me try and figure out what song we could use. Let me help on that. So I literally go to iTunes. Yes, I said iTunes, not Spotify. I'm like your grandma with all her VHS tapes, but except for mine, it's my hard drive that has years and years and years and years and years, gigabytes of music on my hard drive, so I have to go to iTunes. Spotify doesn't have it all, okay? So I go to iTunes, and I search fire, spark, and light. Search that, all the songs pop up, and I just drop them into one playlist. Drag and drop into a playlist, then I make sure I can stream it on my phone. And it was after work, so I'm driving to the hardware store. I think I was going to Menards up in Blue Ash. And I'm just cycling through all the songs on this playlist. Katy Perry, Firework comes on. That's not it, skip. Skip. I just kept skipping songs like, nah, that's not it. And finally, this song comes on. And the lyrics just jump out at me. I'm on fire, they can't put it out. One desire, they can't shut it down. There's nowhere we can run and hide. There's nowhere we can't feel the heat of this fire. There's nowhere we won't shine a light. There's nowhere, no one can't be made alive by his fire. And in that moment, I'm listening to lyrics in this song, and I'm hearing the lyrics of This Little Light of Mine, and I'm also hearing this old gospel song that I hadn't heard in years that my dad used to play. I think it was by a group by the name of Canton Spirituals. And it's the lyrics of it come from Jeremiah, and there's a line that says, it's like fire shut up in my bones. I'm like, man, what is that? And all of a sudden, I'm feeling something's happening. I'm just like, God, I don't know what this is. And all of a sudden, it clicks. I'm driving up I-75 in rush hour traffic, through the construction, and tears are streaming down my face in my car. And it finally clicked. Why do I keep crying? Well, it's because I remember every single kid I got in a fight with growing up. I remember the number of times I came home crying. I remember the number of times I was picked on. I remember feeling alone and broken and lost and lonely. I remember being stuck in an addiction that had me trapped. I remember all of those feelings, the brokenness, the hopelessness. I remember all that, but I don't cry because of those things. I cry because not only do I remember those things, but I now know that there's a God who saves, there's a God that heals, there's a God that redeems, and he's done that for me. Yeah. And these tears are because I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. There's no other way I could express it. All 6'3", 300+ pounds of me, there's no better way that I could express my thankfulness to a God who saves, who heals, and redeems than my tears. There's no other way. There's no other way. And they come out when I share my story. All those years of stuffing my emotions, not knowing what to do with them. It's finally all broken. It's not the way I have to live anymore. I didn't used to know why I cry, but I really do now, and I really understand it. And I know that when I share my story, I'm gonna cry. And I can stop myself short of doing that. But God calls me to do something else. I know that my story, and when I share it, it's one of the best tools that I have for other people to see Jesus. Because maybe if they can see my story and see where I came from and see where I'm at now, they can see the God who loves them and knows them and wants to heal them and has grace and redemption and mercy for them in the same way he had it for me. So I cry. There's a book I've been reading over the last, 2 years, I feel like. I can never finish this book. It's called A Million Miles in a Thousand Years by Donald Miller, sorry. Different Donald. In this book, there's this quote that I absolutely love. He said to me, I was a tree in a story about a forest, and that was arrogant of me to believe any differently. And he told me the story of the forest is better than the story of the tree. I'm a tree in a story about a forest. I have a story that was written by a God who loves me. And sometimes it's really easy for me to get caught up in my own story, to get caught up in my own brokenness. But the reality is that my story, that my brokenness, that the healing that I have now, where I'm at now, when I share that story, people can actually see parts of the forest. They can see the God who loves them, the God who loves me, the God that heals, the God that saves, the God that redeems. And if I'm unwilling to share that story, if I'm unwilling to let people see a glimpse into that, it's nothing but arrogance. I used to believe that I didn't have a story. Maybe that's you. Maybe you believe that you don't have a story. For me right now, sometimes I believe that my story isn't relevant anymore, that people are tired of hearing it. Or that in 3 months or 6 years or 10 years, it will be irrelevant then. Maybe for you, it's the fact that you feel like, I really don't have anything. I don't have a story. And it's a lie that I believe, and it's a lie you maybe believe in. And God says, you have a story. You will always have a story. A way I've seen this recently is through my boss. My boss, Terry, he leads all the community pastors at Crossroads. This is a question we do in one-on-ones with staff around here. People ask you, so what is God doing in you? What is God saying to you? And sometimes I dread that question because I know it's coming every single week when I sit down and say, I know it's coming, but I dread that question because sometimes I haven't spent as much time in the Bible as I once that week, or I haven't had a profound breakthrough. And I started thinking about it differently. What is God doing in you today? What story has he wrote in you today? What have you experienced? What have you learned in the last week that changes from where you're at to where you are now? My story, your story, is whatever God is doing in you right now today. It's whatever God has done for you in the past. It doesn't matter how high your highs are or how low your lows are, you still have a story that's relevant because someone needs to hear it. Someone can connect, someone can relate. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a guy that you're gonna be on a group project with in a few months who's not gonna pull any of his weight. Maybe he's the person that needs to hear your story. Maybe he's in the same exact spot that you are or that you were. And your story is what will allow him to see God in a new way. The verse we've been using for this series, Revelations 12:11. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And they loved their lives not even unto death. There's a piece of sometimes we hold on to our stories. We hold on to the things that we have. And God says, if you would just let those go and share those and let your light shine, not innocently, but boldly and aggressively, you will overcome and other people will overcome because of it. Other people will get free because of it. And in those moments, sometimes it's hard and we have to lay down our pride and lay down our arrogance because things like crying in front of people may happen. That's what happens to me. But I've learned that grown men should cry. Because when I cry, when I share my story, it allows other people to get free. I think what God wants all of us to know and understand is that we all have stories, that you have a story, and that you've got to learn to share it. Thanks.